You, me, and HIFMB. Stories of Science and the Sea.
Hi everybody. I hope you're all having a nice festive period. And for the festive period leading up to Christmas, I have for you Andrea Franke, who recently published a paper in People and Nature on the UN Ocean Decade and how real-world labs can make a real difference in achieving the outcomes that are wanted for the Ocean Decade. We also talk about her move from fisheries biologist in her early days in academia towards being a more interdisciplinary researcher and applying her skills more broadly. And we also chat about how she achieved that move from more specific disciplinary research towards more interdisciplinary research. So without further ado, I give you Andrea Franke. Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB podcast. And today I have Andrea Franke. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm always happy to be in Oldenburg.
Perfect. So you don't actually live in Oldenburg, right?
Well, I live in Kiel and in Oldenburg.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I have a room here in a house, a very beautiful house with
Ah,
a
you do?
garden. Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes.
Right.
But I'm still having my apartment in Kiel
I
because
thought-
part of my work is in Kiel.
Right. I thought you're still traveling and then living in the van or whatever.
Well, I gave up on that
Okay.
in autumn.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. It's cold
Yep.
and there's an energy crisis. Okay. So today, why are you here? First of all, you're a postdoc at HIFMB,
Yes.
and you just recently, I think it's fresh off the press, brought a paper out on the UN Ocean Decade, or on real world labs. So it's called it's a mouthful, but it's a lot to unpack. So it's making the UN Ocean Decade work. The potential and challenges for interdisciplinary research and real-world laboratories for building towards ocean solutions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even transdisciplinary.
Even trans, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, what did I say?
Inter.
Oh, sorry.
But that's already a perfect start.
Yeah.
Because I know you have the difference clear. It's super funny that happened to you now
Yeah,
because
whoops.
a lot of people don't have this difference very clear because it is rather complex.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Freudian slip.
No worries.
Whoops.
Yep.
Okay. So it just came out in People in Nature. When
Yes.
did it come out?
Just on Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Yes.
Big day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very happy that it came out, right? It was a lot of work. It took a long time because
Sounds like
we
it.
were quite a few authors and most of them very busy. And yeah, we went to one revision and that's the second version, so to say, that's published. And it took a while, as usual with publications. I'm very happy that's finally out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the final version?
Yes, I'm very happy with the
Yeah.
final version. I'm way happier with the final version than the first version, as it should be.
Yeah.
The reviewers honestly did a great job. I mean, it can be a little destroying sometimes, right, to
Yeah.
get reviews, and it was tough. But I have to admit that mostly they were right, and we did implement most of the things that they were asking us for, almost all, I have to say,
Yeah.
and it changed the paper quite a bit. The structure, how we started, the introduction, and everything. So honestly, if review processes, they can be tough and long, but it can be quite a good experience in the end.
Yeah.
Because you really feel that because of this perspective from outside, things are getting actually really better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you spoke about the team there for a
Yeah.
bit. What's who are the main players on this paper? I mean, it's a long list.
So yeah, it's a long list. So maybe I should say that here at HIFMB we have the project Create, which is a DAM mission project, or BMBF funded, and or DAM.
Yeah,
Depends also
yeah.
on who you ask.
German
Deutsche
administration.
Allianz Meeresforschung.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly. And BMBF is funding these projects, and yeah. I was back then involved in the proposal writing of Create, and Create aims to work in real-world labs or living labs, as they call them, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
And after the pre-proposal was submitted to the BMBF, Helmut came up with the idea to write a manuscript about marine real-world labs or marine living labs. And So the co-authors are not all of them, but most of them, I think almost all of them, apart from Gesche, they are all involved in create. So I think Gesche is not involved in create. I'm not even 100% sure, but the other ones, most of them are involved in create.
Right. Okay.
And that's why I had this fantastic opportunity to work with a team of interdisciplinary researchers, because they're all coming from different fields, and it was an excellent opportunity. And when Helmut asked me if I want to do that, I was like, of course, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
So yeah, and a perfect time to be doing it, because we are right now in the UN Ocean Decade.
Yeah.
Can you give us a brief rundown of what that is?
So the Ocean Decade has just started in 2021.
Yeah.
It was prepared for a long time, of course, but it was launched last year. And the Ocean Decade is short for United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So in fact, this decade is about science, and it's about creating inter and transdisciplinary science to overcome certain challenges that we have and work towards certain outcomes that the decade is hoping or wishing for.
And what are those outcomes? What are they?
So there are in total 10 challenges, and for example, to sustainably feed the global population and others. And the outcomes are to have, for example, a clean ocean, a healthy ocean, a resilient ocean, and also what I like a lot, a safe ocean, and an inspiring and engaging ocean as well. So you have in total 7 outcomes.
7 outcomes.
That they're working towards.
Yeah, and they have to be or they want to reach them by 2030.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preferably, yeah.
Yeah,
so the decade ends in 2030, and then the question is, how do they want to do that? And if people really are interested in the Ocean Decade, they could look it up. Of course, you can look it up online, but you can check there. It's called Ocean Decade Action Framework, and then in fact you get a better idea of how it's organized.
Right.
So the objectives are obviously to create knowledge and to overcome the challenges like ocean pollution and the overuse of ocean, and then have these outcomes. And they want to do that by launching decade actions, and these actions have already started last year. So these actions are projects that you can apply for to get funding.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you're doing this via the use of real world laboratories in this paper?
No, well, okay. So I can see already that the title has already so much information. Maybe we should.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Maybe we should have gone for something shorter. So what I tried to explain is that the Ocean Decade, of course, is it's a gigantic endeavor, right? The vision of the Ocean Decade is the science we need for the ocean we want. And then the question is, how do we get there? How do we get to what we want?
Yeah. And
how do we even decide what we need? Because obviously different people have different needs.
Yeah.
So it's a very, precise slogan, very compact. But if you think about it a little, it's not really trivial at all, because the "we" already implies that everybody should be involved in this process, right? So if you, as I just said, read a little about the Ocean Decade and get a little into it, you see that it's rather complex and that it's very challenging, and it won't be easy to achieve these outcomes. So we ask ourselves, how could you get there? So how could you create transformative knowledge? How could you work in an inter and transdisciplinary manner? So, and because CREATE, coming back to this project, aims to set up real-world labs, and this all is rather new, we thought, like, yeah, these real-world labs, actually, they could be very helpful using them in these Ocean Decade actions to work towards the goal and outcomes that they're wishing for.
And who's
so in the end, it's long story short, a real-world lab is a transdisciplinary research method.
Okay.
And then the problem is already that then the next question most people ask, what does transdisciplinary mean? Right?
Exactly, yes.
So transdisciplinary means that you, apart from working with different disciplines, together with different disciplines, which is called then interdisciplinary, you also involve other stakeholders. And that could be literally everyone that for a certain research question, because after all it's a research method, that people and parties and organizations, you need to answer certain questions. So this could be government agencies or NGOs, or that could be the industry, or individual people like fishers and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you wrote this beautifully in the paper, I think, or in the abstract. You say that it's the involvement of everyone with stakes in the future of the marine environment and its resources.
Exactly.
Perfect definition. So these are the actors involved in a real-world lab.
Yeah, so you would, if you have a certain research question that you want to work on, you would first of all start with a stakeholder mapping, and you would involve everyone that is necessary and meet together. And the interesting thing is that you don't really formulate your research question just with researchers, just by yourself.
Yeah.
You have an idea, of course, a problem you want to solve, something you want to achieve. That has to be a little more specific than a healthy ocean, because you can just rescue an entire world ocean by yourself.
Yeah.
But then you would meet with these parties and you would discuss the research question and really come up with a question and a goal together with everyone. Yeah, and of course that takes much more time compared to traditional research, where like you and me, we would meet, we would be like, let's run this project. I do some experiments, you analyze the data, we write a paper, right?
Yeah.
This is pretty much very straightforward, and transdisciplinary projects are just much more time consuming, I'd say.
Yeah, and the communication has to be a lot more open and a lot more clearer. And how do you communicate between the different parties effectively?
Well, the thing is that as scientists, it's at least if you're from the same discipline, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Then you don't even have to think about transdisciplinary research. I think the problem starts already if you work truly interdisciplinary. That if you have people from different disciplines, certain terms can mean honestly different things, and you can have a lot of misunderstandings, and then things just become, you need some patience and some energy, and also to accept other people's views and to be open for them. Not everyone is so interested in talking to the entire world. Some people just want to do their research, which is absolutely fine, because you need fundamental basic research to produce facts and knowledge. And communication, I'd say, between different scientists, according to my own experience, can be already really tricky. Because you have your jargon, and other people, they feel like this means something completely different, And then if you want to involve people with a totally different background, like from NGOs or from governments and so on, then of course communication will just be much or way more tricky, so to say, right?
Yeah.
So I think it will take a while until people then really understand what we're all talking about and what we want to work towards, and so on. So I would say communication is key, and in order to, and I guess it's normal to have misunderstandings, but then you just need the time to work through it, right?
Yeah. How long do you have like a brief time or a rough time frame of how long a real world lab takes usually for a decision or to come up with an intervention?
The thing is that we suggest real world labs, or some people also call them living labs, for the marine environment, so marine real world labs. But in fact, to my knowledge, there are already some, and we are mentioning some examples, of course. There's, for example, here at the University Gute Küste, and there's real world labs in all these DRM projects, and, because there's more than Create, and they are working in real-world labs. But all in all, we had the feeling that in the marine realm, it's a rather new method.
Yeah. Okay.
So real-world labs or living labs are much more common in urban planning, for example. They have a longer history there, also in other terrestrial research fields. But in marine science, it seems to be rather new. And I know from Create and other projects that are setting up real-world labs that these projects are running for 3-4 years, right? So that's the time frame that you have to work in a real-world lab. And it sounds maybe long, but I have to say this is... Honestly, I feel it's rather short because I don't know from your research, but I know from my research during my PhD, 3 years pass by in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because things, before you have organized your research, and if you work experimentally as I did, things can simply go wrong. Statistics are never easy. Then you publish, you don't, maybe the revision goes wrong, or so you don't publish, so you get rejected. And so 3 years is not a long time. And if you then consider that you first have to do a stakeholder mapping, so first you have to find all these people that you want to work with together, and then go through the entire process. I think it's rather short.
Yeah.
But so this will take, depending on the question you want to answer, that might take several years. Yeah.
Yeah. Is a question that you want to answer in this case of the ocean decade linked to the decade outcome? So you have one question for each outcome, or is it completely different?
So what we are doing in the paper is that we are discussing the societal challenges that we are all facing, trying to work towards ocean sustainability. And we especially focus on ocean governance and the blue economy, because we feel that real-world labs could be feasible opportunity to develop more dynamic marine governance goals, and they could also help to transform the blue economy, which is often not sustainable if you think, for example, about overfishing or unsustainable aquaculture practices. And these things, an improved ocean governance and a more sustainable blue economy, they're of course needed to achieve the overarching ocean decade outcomes of a clean, healthy and productive ocean.
No, exactly. But you also on page 6 of the paper, you give this really cool, very summarizing figure.
Yeah. Exactly.
That pretty much shows the process of how it's how it's working.
Yeah. And exactly. So we put this figure together after a paper written by Vanna et al. In 2018. So they describe the method of real-world labs, and it has 3 steps: co-design, co-production, and co-evaluation. And we just put it in the context of ocean-related issues and what you could address and what you could achieve. That so people can't see the graph at the moment, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
But so the method was out there, and we just used the framework that was already developed by Vanna et al. And put it in marine context. And what you can see easily in the middle of this graph, if people want to read the paper, maybe.
Yeah, definitely look at the figure.
You see that a real-world lab is about science-practice interaction, right? So you have natural and social scientists, so interdisciplinary people, and you have practitioners on the other side, which are stakeholders, all kind of stakeholders that for your question would be relevant. And you meet together, as I said, you co-design your research question, you co-produce knowledge, and that's an interesting part, I find, because you don't produce knowledge alone anymore as a scientist. You try to, do that together with other people that also have ideas and a certain background and a certain knowledge. Coming back for example, to fishers. Why am I coming back to that? Because I'm a fishery scientist by training. Is fishers know way more than we know about when you can catch where and when you can catch a certain species. And they can, I don't know, we know a fisher in Kiel. He has worked on the same spot, more or less, fishing herring for 50 years. So you can learn so much.
Exactly,
and these things you cannot find in papers, right?
Exactly. You can't replicate that in a 3-year PhD.
Exactly, you can't. And that's what I love about this whole idea is about that it's about knowledge exchange. So really, people come together and they exchange what they know, and also their maybe their wishes and fears and their ideas or visions of the solution. So it's not that I'm telling you how this works, right? And after you co-produce some new knowledge, then you can, or in this co-production process, what you can do is you can really experiment with different scenarios. So that's also difference between any transdisciplinary research method, because there's many transdisciplinary research methods. But what is different in real-world labs, or what's special about them, is that the core of real-world labs, you have experimentation. So you would experiment together on certain scenarios and see what's working and what's not working. In a perfect scenario, you could then come to a so-called real-world intervention. So this means you actually implement the solution that you've been working on. And then that's really a big difference between just doing research for yourself, publishing a paper, and then go on to the next.
Exactly.
This is really different from working on something together and implementing this out there in the real world.
But potentially so much more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. And also there's so many more challenges, right? If you want to, so having something on paper or implementing something is two different things, right? So that's a big challenge. And we had a lot of discussion, because I'm an experimental biologist. We had a lot of discussions with my co-author Kim. What means real world, and what means what means to experiment in the real world? What means to experiment in the lab? Of course, there's a lot of pitfalls and dangers with experimenting, and there's an ethical dimension, and there's a lot of things you have to consider. It's not so easy. The idea is to jointly work on things together and to consider all kinds of different knowledges and cultures and so on. And if you work towards a potential solution that may be implemented, and if you get to the point, then the third step would be a co-evaluation. So you evaluate actually, and I find this very important, and for me it's the most crucial step, the third one in the entire story, because you really check if what you've intended to implement, if that's actually working. Or if not, or maybe things have changed already, maybe the conditions have changed, or other things happened, and then things are just not working, and you realize your solution, that's why it's always called potential solution, actually is not a real solution. And then you could go, it's a cyclic, like a concept, you could go back to the beginning and start again a co-design, a co-production concept, if you have the time and the money.
Obviously this takes time then. If it's like you come up with or you start with the experimentation phase, you see if something, or first of all you come up with the idea, then the experimentation phase, then you implement something, then you reevaluate if this is actually working, go back to the ideas. So obviously this takes time. It takes
a lot of time.
But
it takes a lot of time, but what I love about the idea is that it's about participation. That everyone with stakes in the future or in this area, everyone that has stakes in this area or this context could hopefully potentially participate.
Exactly, beautifully summarized. So if people want to look at the paper, it's it's published in People and Nature. There's also a plain language summary. I think if they Google you, they will find it quickly.
Yes, I think it's already on my Google Scholar.
Google Scholar.
And it's open access.
Twitter open access. Perfect.
It's open access. What I really love. That's great. And yes, the journal asked us for plain language summary. I think that's and it's linked in the paper. There's a link to the plain language summary, which is nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sweet. So you mentioned a couple of times now that you are an experimental biologist or fisheries biologist.
Yeah.
I want to dive into that, into your academic history, so to say. So first of all, most important thing, where are you from?
I was born in Cottbus,
Yeah.
so I did not grow up by the sea.
Yeah. Me neither.
Yeah, but how did you get into?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I started diving at some point, and then this kind of sparked. So we always spent time at the Baltic Sea, but I started diving at some point, and then caught the bug.
Yeah,
the ocean bug.
Yeah. Same here.
yeah, exactly. Yes.
So yeah, we of course we went on holidays to the Baltic Sea, and the Baltic Sea has such beautiful beaches.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So underrated.
So underrated, especially the further east you go. Like if you go to Usedom or Poland or whatever, it's magnificent, honestly. And I loved that as a child, and my whole family loved it. So we would go often then on vacation to other countries, but often not always, but often to the sea. And I started diving when I was like, I think 16 or 17 or so. I did a course on Gran Canaria. I think the classy holiday thing, right? Only that I will never forget, the whole course was in a swimming pool, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And it was just one final dive was in the sea. And I found it so fascinating and so beautiful. And I guess it was the same for you. And that's when I decided that I want to study marine biology. I think it's a classy thing, right?
It's almost the same for me. I just started in a little lake near Leipzig. That's why I started diving. Yeah. So no sea for me, but
okay.
Yeah, a little lake. Okay, so your and then your academic path kind of started in Kiel, though.
Yeah. So since you can't study marine biology where I grew up, I went to Kiel. I could have also gone to Rostock, I suppose, or Hamburg, but yeah, I applied. I got a spot in Kiel. And the cool thing was that back then, that's a long time ago, in fact, quite a while, you could study marine biology or fisheries biology.
Oh, right. As a diploma.
Back then it was a diploma. So what's a master now? The master still exists at Geomar in Kiel. It's called biological oceanography by now.
Yeah.
You can still study this master, but you cannot specialize in fisheries biology anymore because back then the fisheries biologist, the professor here retired. He retired shortly after I started to study. So so for me that was great because that means I could still study fisheries biology.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, he just retired later, some years later. And so I found, they teach you all kinds of different things. It's about different ecosystems, benthic organisms and microorganisms and all that. I found it like interesting, of course, but then the fisheries class started and I was like, wow, this is super cool. Yeah, I loved it from the beginning. I loved this interaction between the sea and humans. I found it fascinating immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in socio-ecological systems.
Yeah. I can tell from your CV. It speaks social-ecological.
Yeah. So I became a fisheries biologist. But then, since people in the department, they were all natural scientists, of course. They were, or what means, of course. Unfortunately, maybe. Back then, in this department was a bunch of lovely people. They all work in different places now. And we were all natural scientists. And so I did my master's thesis on the effect of ocean acidification on the development of fish larvae.
Of herring, right?
Yeah.
Atlantic herring.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Herring that we caught right there in the Baltic. In the Kiel Canal, in fact, because they come to the coast and they go up the Kiel Canal, and also they come into the fjord. And back then, I went to the fisher that I mentioned already before. So you go there, heat, and you get your freshly caught herring. You strip spawn them, you fertilize the eggs, and you run your experiment.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah,
all at the harbor.
All at you get them from the fisher in the canal, in that case, in the harbor. Yeah. And the experiments were run all at GeoMar because they have fantastic facilities to work experimentally.
Yeah, I've heard. I've only seen it from outside, never from the inside.
Yeah, they have the big advantage that they have access to water.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds simple, but not everyone has access to
We don't.
marine water. Exactly,
Yeah.
we don't. And they have a flow-through system. You can use as much water as you need.
Oh yeah. That's a big kicker.
Yeah. It's a big advantage.
Yeah.
So I started off as an experimental biologist.
Mm-hmm. And then, you went to a bunch of research cruises in your CV. It says from 2003 to 2014, you went on research cruises.
Yeah, not every year. I didn't do that yearly, but for a while. So we have a time series. GeoMar is a time series every, I don't want to lie, every April and May.
Right.
They go on 2 cruises where they mainly catch cod. To do assessments, and so they have a time series over many years, which is very valuable. You don't have, not every institute has such time series. And I used to go on these fisheries cruises for a while, even though it was never really part of exactly the projects I did, but I kept on going. And when I started my PhD in aquaculture, for the first and the second year, my supervisors, thank you, they still let me go. Even though it had nothing to do with my PhD.
A deep passion for it.
Yeah, it was. It's super fascinating, right?
Yeah.
You're on a research vessel for 2 weeks. We always once went to a harbor, so I've never been on these crazy long research excursions.
Me neither.
Like 3 or 6 weeks, and I'm also not sure if I could do it.
Yes.
I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. So there, it's perfect. You're 1 week, you're just on the water with the crew, and and then you go to harbor one night, you see some land, then you have another week of the cruise, and it's extremely fascinating, especially at the beginning, just to be on a ship away from everything, Back then, when I started, there was no internet or so, but then it was super slow that you couldn't use it, so you are with a bunch of people, and that's what you do for 2 weeks. And it's also out of social reasons. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah. And then you started your PhD in 2012 on aquaculture.
Exactly, yeah. So I did my...
so we're still in Kiel?
Yeah, still in Kiel, still at GeoMar. I did my master's with... My supervisor was Katriona Clemenson, and in my PhD she was still my supervisor, then along with Olivia Roth. And in between the master's and the PhD, I traveled for a while, and I worked for a while as a technician in a project. So that's why there's such a big gap. And working as a technician was also fascinating. It was I think, I learned a lot from that, because for a while I worked for a scientist. Yeah. As a technician. Yeah. Before I became myself a proper scientist for my PhD.
I think that gives you a whole different perspective on things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to say that this time was, to be honest, quite enjoyable, because you don't have so much responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's not that I didn't take my job seriously. On the contrary, I loved it. Mm-hmm. And Christoph, my boss back then, he was very happy. We were a really good team, but I didn't have the pressure that things had to work out. Yeah. I gave my best that it worked. Exactly. But I was not the one who later had to write the report and hand it in to the funding agency and to apply to explain why things maybe took longer or didn't work out. In the end, everything worked out in that project. The thing is, if you work experimentally, you always have a lot of pressure, because the animals that you're working with, they can simply die, and you have to start from the beginning on. And since projects are always limited in time, that can be a lot of pressure. Yeah. So actually, I really enjoyed it. And in the end, they hired me as a scientist even in that project, because we wrote a paper together on the buoyancy of fish eggs. I will not go into detail. That's very specific, but very important. Yeah. Because cod eggs, for example, they have a certain buoyancy, so it's important that they're in a certain area where they can float, and in that area there should be enough oxygen so they survive. Ah, okay. So that's a lot about hypoxia and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I started my PhD in aquaculture. In fact, an aquaculture project, working some years again with fish larvae, with sea bass larvae, trying to stimulate the immune system. I always have to laugh even by myself. myself if I'm saying it, but yeah, so it's a little the idea of, or exactly the idea that you have if you buy probiotic yogurt, for example. So we try to stimulate the immune system of fish larvae, because when they hatch, the immune system is not fully developed yet. It's far away from being fully developed. And the microbiota plays a big role in the development, the gut microbiota especially, but also in the gills and so on. Plays a big role in the development of the immune response. So if you influence this microbiota in a certain way, then you can train the immune system better, so to say, and have a better immune response earlier on, and hopefully boost the survival rate of fish in aquaculture, of fish larvae in aquaculture. So yeah, I did that some years of my life.
What's the status of cod, and what was the other one, sea bass?
So sea bass is an aquaculture, is a typical aquaculture species. So I don't know if you go on vacation to Spain or Portugal, one of the fish that you can always eat there is sea bass and sea bream, right?
Yeah, okay, yes.
And these two, they are mainly from aquaculture.
Right.
Yeah, most of them will not be wild caught fish.
Yeah, okay.
So the aquaculture for sea bream and sea bass in Spain and I think also France and Italy and so on, and the Mediterranean is working well. So to say, what means working well? It's they produce a lot of fish. That's what I'm telling you. It's established. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, it's quite established.
Thanks to your research.
No, I don't think so, but maybe some less larvae died due to my research.
Yeah, exactly. That's playing a big role.
Yeah.
So okay, after the PhD, you actually became had a bunch of roles as scientific coordinator, project manager twice, and is this when kind of the interdisciplinarity became a thing for you, or?
Yes, actually yes, because so far I was, as I said, I was interested in socio-ecological systems, but truth is that I've worked very specifically with fish, and not just with fish, but with fish larvae. Right. So just with one stage in the entire life cycle, right? Yeah. It was very, very specific. And I enjoyed it back then. And maybe I would still do it. I don't know. But then someone was looking for a scientific coordinator for an ocean health project, so to say. And I applied and I got the position. That was also at Geomar. Yeah. And in Kiel, back then, we had a cluster of excellence, Future Ocean.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was super interdisciplinary. And it was, it was really nice to have such a cluster. And the cluster was about to end for the second time already, and they were writing a proposal for the third phase. So, of course, then if you want to have a cluster a third time, you have to show that you've been achieving a lot, but that there's a lot of more things to do. So you kind of have to reinvent yourself, I'd say. So they had the idea, which I think was excellent, to write a transdisciplinary proposal. Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't get funded. I think they were a little ahead of their time, to be honest. And,
unfortunate.
And also if you write inter and transdisciplinary proposals, but your reviewers are all highly disciplinary, then maybe the entire system is also not perfect. Anyway, so they wanted to explore new research fields and to see who's doing what in Kiel and what could we propose. And so I became the scientific coordinator for the topic of ocean health. And I really liked it. I got to talk to a lot of people with different perspectives, with different backgrounds. And what we did then in the end, we organized together with another colleague that was working on ocean recovery. We organized a symposium and a workshop, and we invited a lot of people from Kiel, of course, but also international people. Yeah. That was just interdisciplinary. That was not a transdisciplinary process at all. It was a symposium and a workshop, but I really enjoyed it. And it worked out quite well. We published a nice paper, I'd say, a beautiful paper. I really like the ocean health paper. Yeah, with you in the lead, right? Came out in 2020. Yes, exactly. That was the result of the symposium and the workshop. And we were, because before you mentioned that we were quite a few authors for the Real World Lab, I think for the ocean health paper we were I'd say almost 20 people.
Oh yeah, I can't count that quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's many.
Because what we did after the symposium, so we invited a couple of people, they gave a presentation, and on the second day we organized a workshop. We organized 4 workshops, so we divided the people into 4 groups, and that was super helpful later on, because those 4 groups, they also worked together writing the proposal, and then everyone was working on their part, and then in the end we integrated these parts. And that's why it was possible to do it. I didn't have to talk to all these 20 people all the time. I just needed to talk to 1 or 2 of each group, right? Because they've been working on their parts individually. So there was the papers not just about ocean health. It's also about the connection between ocean and human health, and that's going back to my interest then, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah, it was. I had some very fascinating co-authors that are doing, for me, work that's absolutely stunning. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that this kind of built your interdisciplinary recognition, and then you were, or from that point you were more interdisciplinarily recognized?
Well, you have to ask other people.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know if I have this recognition. Honestly, I couldn't tell. But what I can say is that I got interested in this kind of work. So from that moment on, I decided that I wouldn't want to work on fish related topics only.
Yeah.
So last year, for example, I did another herring larvae experiment. So it's not that I don't do that at all anymore, but then it was clear that I didn't want to spend all my life experimenting with fish in the lab. Only. Yeah, nice. So that was then my goal, to go more and more towards inter and transdisciplinary research. And this ocean health paper is an interdisciplinary effort, but since the proposal was supposed to be, or it proposed transdisciplinary research, we, because there were many different scientific coordinators back then in the cluster, and we learned a lot about transdisciplinary research. We went to conferences and stuff. So this position honestly was wonderful. I learned a lot of fascinating things, and I also enjoyed my PhD. Nice. But my PhD was very specific, and then all of a sudden it was very broad, and I enjoyed that change. Yeah.
Did that transition come naturally to you, or did you have to work a lot to make that, like, from very specific to very broad?
I'd say very broad is easier for me even.
Is it? Nice.
I think so, yeah. Or maybe by now. Okay. I used to be interested in very specific things, and then I could read all about a certain gene,
Yeah.
And I used to be very into details back then in the master's and the PhD. But somehow I think it was just a natural development. Somehow I got less and less interested in things that are super fundamental and super specific. I really got more and more interested in broader concepts, and I think this has a lot to do with this position being a scientific coordinator. And back then we talked a lot about the SDGs. And about sustainable development, and climate change is becoming more and more apparent, and a bigger problem. I don't know if we wouldn't have this massive threat of climate change, and if, for example, so many fish stocks were not overfished, if the world was a better place, maybe I would still be in my little climate chamber working on, gene expression patterns of certain fish larvae. But I have to say, I think we are facing serious problems, and it's interesting for me to think about these things, and to work on them, and somehow be a little part of this solution that maybe, hopefully, we come up with in the next decades.
So this is what then led you to here, to HIFMB in 2020?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think I remember your proposal from the beginning. You still work with herring, right?
Yeah. So what brought me here was that since I was part of this big proposal writing for Future Ocean, I applied. In fact, I think I applied for your position.
Did you? Oh.
We can talk about this later, maybe.
Whoops,
I
sorry.
think I applied for your position. I'm not quite sure. I didn't get it.
Okay.
Anyway, I wrote also a proposal for the postdoc pool we have here at HIFMB.
The HIP.
Exactly.
Pool,
It's called HIP, HIFMB, HI, postdoc pool.
Yeah,
HIP. We are the HIPs. So every year they hire a new HIP cohort. And the proposal I wrote was about climate change effects on fish early life stages. So the first thing I did last year was running, going kind of back to the roots, to my master's thesis. Exactly. Investigating temperature rise and bacterial infections, the synergistic effects of both on the very early development after fish larvae, just when they're hatching. Yeah, and I have this RNA-seq transcriptome data set and microbiota and whatnot, and I'm still trying to analyze these data.
Yeah, okay.
So they were sequenced, and then a bioinformatician analyzed them, and now I'm trying to make sense of the results. Yeah,
and on the side working.
It's a lot of data, and in the same moment, we wrote this real-world lab paper.
Exactly,
so I'm doing both things.
Yeah.
I'm still doing both things, but it's very more interesting for me by now to think about concepts. You know, like, for example, the ocean health paper that we wrote, it was a lot about what does ocean health even mean. So if you see the SDG 14, it's one of the goals to achieve a healthy ocean by 2020. So that's a while ago. I think it didn't work, unfortunately. One of the outcomes of the ocean decade is, again, a healthy ocean. But yet, if you ask people have very different opinions, or even, what does it really mean, and definitions, and how could, and if you ask how to get there, it's becoming even more complicated, because if the goal that you have is rather fuzzy, then it's hard to decide how to get there, because if we pursue a certain goal together, but we are not even on the same page what that actually means, then how do we want to go there? And that's what the ocean health paper is about. So it's also a lot about communication and understandings, and what things actually mean to different people.
So you kind of already asked at this stage. I always ask the guests what's next for them.
I'm actually looking forward to to keep on working with Kim and her group. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
How long is your contract here for now?
It's a stressful topic.
Oh, sorry.
Bad end.
Okay.
No, it's another year.
Okay.
Which it's always, I think that when the last year is starting, it always feels like, I don't know how you feel about these short-term contracts, but
not great.
Not great, exactly. And at the beginning, I mean, I know everyone knows time is flying, and 3 years are over no time, but still at the beginning it's like, it's 3 years, it's something you can work with. And then I think everyone feels different about these things. But for me, this countdown and stress increases when the last year is starting, ding, 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 ding.
But I think you've done an excellent job of creating, with this paper, creating something really worthwhile here. And hopefully we can keep you here.
Yeah, that would be excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. Is there anything like, we're already at the 50-minute mark. Is there anything that you feel like we've missed and that you want to add? Or
No. I want to thank you very much for inviting me.
No worries.
I was like, oh, wow, he wants to talk to me. I don't know if I have to.
No, it's a perfect time. I mean, this paper.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for inviting me and for doing this podcast. It's amazing.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Want to dive deeper? Surf over to hifmb.de or follow us on Twitter at hifmb_OL.